If you look at most modern preflop ranges, you'll notice that we're supposed to raise a low frequency of baby pairs and suited connectors from early position. Ask most players why, and they'll tell you that we do it for board coverage. In other words, these hands strengthen our range on boards that early position normally doesn't hit that well, which supposedly increases the EV of our other holdings. Think aces or kings on a board like 5-4-3. It feels much more comfortable value betting these hands, knowing that our range is protected by the occasional set or straight. But let's take a deeper look at the logic behind this. Our range only benefits from the presence of these small pairs and suited connectors if our opponent somehow knew that we were raising them. If he didn't, it wouldn't matter how many of them we had. Our opponent would still play very aggressively on low boards, and our aces and kings would still face a ton of pressure despite the presence of these hands in our range. Likewise, if we could somehow trick our opponent into thinking that we did have these small pairs and connectors, then our aces and kings would enjoy all the benefits of having these hands in our range without them actually being present in our range. In other words, board coverage doesn't work the way that most people think. Against a real opponent, raising a hand like 5-6 suited from early position has zero effect on the EV of our other holdings. Our opponent is going to respond the same way regardless, so our main concern should be whether or not 5-6 suited itself is plus EV to open. For example, some players tend to be overly aggressive when they perceive our range as capped. Against a table full of such players, 5-6 suited would have excellent post-flop EV since the boards we hit are also those where our opponent is likely to be aggressive. Consequently, we should raise this hand not just at a low frequency, but 100% of the time. On the other hand, against players who are not capable of attacking us on low boards, it's perfectly fine to fold 5-6 suited 100% of the time. The same idea applies to post-flop as well. When choosing combos to bet or check, board coverage should not be our main consideration. There is a popular idea that we cannot bet all of our flush draws on the flop because our checking range would have no flush draws, leaving us vulnerable on flush completing turns. But in reality, it's impossible for our opponent to know what exactly we are doing with our flush draws. So instead of playing a defensive strategy where all our bases are covered, we should really be trying to exploit him instead. In this case, the main thing to consider is how aggressively our opponent will probe the turn when the flush completes. If we think he will probe more aggressively than GTO, then we should check our flush draws. If not, then we should bet. This is the main reason why we study with solvers. They show us what the GTO baseline is so that we can identify mistakes in our opponent's strategy. Without knowing the baseline, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking you're exploiting someone without actually exploiting them. For example, let's say a certain player has shown that he is capable of overbet probing the turn with both flushes and bluffs. Based on that alone, we might think that he is aggressive enough to justify checking back our flush draws on the flop. Certainly, he puts in much more money on flush completing turns than the average regular. But the real question is, does he put in more money compared to GTO? Looking at the GTO solution, Big Blind is supposed to overbet with not only flushes, but hands like 2 pairs and sets as well. As long as these hands are not going for the overbet, we are probably better off betting our flush draws on the flop, regardless of how aggressive our opponent might seem.